I remember the night my life changed. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, like a match being struck in the dark. My husband, Richard Hall, sat across the dining table, scrolling through his phone while I tried to tell him about a new design idea I'd been thinking about. He didn't even look up. "Catherine," he said flatly, "you don't have a business mind. You're not built for that kind of thing. Just focus on home." That was the moment I realized he didn't see me. Not really, I was a convenience, a background character in the story of his life. For years I had played my role perfectly: the polite wife, the supportive partner, the woman who smiled through dinner parties and stayed silent when interrupted. But deep inside, something was burning. I had ideas, hundreds of them. Designs, colors, moods, visions that could turn any dull room into a work of art. But every time I tried to express them, Richard would laugh or roll his eyes. "You can't build an empire out of daydreams, Catherine." He was wrong. The first spark came one afternoon when I visited a friend who owned a small furniture store. She was struggling with her displays, and I offered to help rearrange her layout. When we were done, her store looked brand new. Within a week, her sales tripled. She called me in tears. "You have a gift, Catherine. You should be doing this for a living." That night, after Richard went to sleep, I sat by the window with my laptop and started researching how to start a design business. I had no formal degree, no capital, just an eye for detail and a hunger that wouldn't go away. I called it Monroe Interiors. It started in my garage. I took on small clients, friends, neighbors, anyone who'd trust me. I didn't tell Richard much because I knew what he'd say: "You're wasting your time." But little by little it grew. I worked late into the night, studying, sketching, watching tutorials, building a portfolio. Then one day I received an email from a boutique hotel downtown. They wanted to meet me. I couldn't breathe. I remember rereading the email 10 times, afraid it would disappear if I blinked. The next day I put on my best outfit, drove downtown, and walked into that meeting like my life depended on it, because it did. They gave me the contract, a $90,000 project, my first big break. When I told Richard that evening, he didn't even congratulate me. He smirked. "90,000, let me guess, you'll spend half on fabrics and candles." I just smiled. "Maybe I'll surprise you." He didn't know I already was. When your own husband laughs at your dreams, you either break or you build, and I built. Subscribe if you've ever been underestimated. This one's for you. Within a year, Monroe Interiors had contracts with 3 luxury hotels and several private clients. The money started rolling in quietly, beautifully, into an account he didn't even know existed. Richard still thought it was my little decorating thing. He'd brag about his work, his business trips, his investments, all while I built something stronger right under his nose. By the time he noticed, I had already expanded. I rented a downtown studio, hired a team, and started buying property under Monroe Holdings LLC. My empire had begun in silence. Then came our 20th anniversary. Richard wanted a massive party. He loved the idea of appearing powerful, surrounded by people who flattered him. I just smiled and agreed. That night, the house was filled with laughter, music, and clinking glasses. I remember standing by the staircase, watching everyone talk, thinking, none of these people know the truth. Halfway through dinner, one of Richard's associates, a property developer, mentioned my company. "We just signed a deal with Monroe Interiors," he said. "Incredible firm. The owner, Catherine Monroe, she's brilliant." The room went quiet. Richard's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. I looked up slowly and smiled. "Yes, that's me." You could have heard a pin drop. He forced a laugh. "That's funny." But I didn't laugh. I just looked him in the eye and said, "Not really. I've been running the company for 3 years." The tension in his face told me everything: embarrassment, shock, and a trace of fear. That night he didn't sleep in our room. He stayed downstairs, pretending to watch TV. I could hear the sound of the glass hitting the counter again and again. After that night, he changed. He started showing up to my office uninvited, pretending to be helpful. He asked about finances, contracts, my clients, all the things he never cared about before. But I wasn't foolish. I had already learned that love without respect is just control disguised as care. So I moved carefully. I created new bank accounts. I transferred every asset under Monroe Holdings. I hired a lawyer quietly. When he asked about merging finances, I told him gently, "Richard, I think we should both keep our independence." He didn't like that. Within weeks, I discovered he had taken money from our joint account, almost $80,000 to pay off his gambling debts. When I confronted him, he yelled, "You wouldn't have anything without me." I just stared at him and said softly, "Maybe you're right. Without your doubt, I'd still be waiting for permission." He went silent. That's when I filed for divorce. No fights, no tears, just a clean, cold signature. But the real revenge wasn't the divorce. It was watching him realize what he'd lost. After I left, his business fell apart. Turns out he had been borrowing against his reputation for years. The contacts, the charm, the deals, all of it crumbled once people stopped believing in him. He even tried to show up at my office once, asking for advice. He looked thinner, tired, older. "Catherine," he said quietly, "maybe we could talk. You always had a good head for business. I just didn't see it before." I smiled kindly. "You still don't." And I walked away. Now every morning when I unlock my glass office door, sunlight floods the room. My employees greet me, strong, capable women who remind me of who I used to be. I glance at the framed article on my wall. Monroe Interiors, the woman who redefined power through design. Below it, my signature. That's my revenge, not in what I took, but in what I became. So if you're listening to this and someone is telling you that you can't, don't argue. Don't cry, just build quietly, because the best revenge is living so high above the noise that they can't even reach you to apologize. And when they finally do, smile. Let them know you don't need closure when success already closed the door for you. It's strange how silence feels different when you're at peace. The same kind of quiet that used to choke me in that big house with Richard now feels calm, almost sacred in my new apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. I built a life here that fits me, finally. Every piece of furniture, every warm light, every small detail speaks of who I am. I don't have to explain myself anymore. It's been a year since the divorce. Monroe Interiors has doubled its income. I opened branches in Dallas and Miami. My face was on the cover of Design Sphere magazine. I remember holding that issue in my hands and smiling, not because of fame, but because of freedom. Then one afternoon, as I was finishing a client consultation, my assistant came in. "Catherine, someone's here to see you." I looked up, and there he was. Richard Hall, he looked. Smaller, not physically, but spiritually. His eyes were hollow, his suit cheap, his hair thinner. The man who once made me feel insignificant now looked like someone who had been forgotten by time. He gave me a faint smile. "Hi, Catherine." For a second, my old instincts kicked in that polite urge to comfort, to make things less awkward. But I stopped myself. "Richard," I said, standing tall. "What brings you here?" He took a deep breath, glancing around my sleek office, the glass walls, the logo behind my desk that said Monroe Interiors. "You've done well," he said quietly. "Really well." I didn't respond. He hesitated, then continued, I've had a few setbacks. The business didn't hold up after the divorce. I made some bad deals. You know how it goes." Not anymore." He shifted uncomfortably. "Anyway, I came here to ask if you'd consider helping me. Maybe investing or hiring me as a consultant. I know a lot about business." There it was, the audacity. The same man who used to tell me I wasn't built for business, standing in front of me asking for one. I folded my hands on the desk and looked at him carefully. "Richard, you once told me I wasn't business-minded." He chuckled awkwardly. "Yeah, I was an idiot. You proved me wrong." "I did," I said softly. "But you didn't just underestimate me. You belittled me. You made me believe I was nothing." He opened his mouth, but no words came. "So tell me, Richard." I continued, "Why should I help you now?" He swallowed hard. Because I need it, and I thought maybe after everything you'd understand." I took a slow breath, stood up, and walked to the window. The city stretched out before me, tall buildings, moving cars, people chasing dreams. Once upon a time, I would have said yes, out of love, out of guilt, out of habit, but that Catherine doesn't exist anymore. When I turned back to him, I smiled, not cruelly, but with the kind of calm that comes from finally understanding your own worth. "Richard," I said, "I will help you, but not the way you think." He looked up, hopeful. "You will?" I opened my drawer and pulled out an envelope. Inside it was a check. He took it quickly, eyes scanning the numbers, and then froze. It wasn't money. It was a letter of recommendation for a small interior design internship program that my company ran for struggling individuals who wanted to rebuild their lives. At the bottom it said, "Accepted only after completing 6 months of unpaid apprenticeship." He looked up, disbelief spreading across his face. "You're joking." I met his gaze evenly. "No, you said you know business. Start at the bottom. Learn what respect feels like when you don't already have power." He let out a bitter laugh. "You want me to be your intern?" "No," I said softly. "I want you to experience what it means to be underestimated by someone who once believed in you." He tore the paper in half and threw it on my desk. "You think this is funny?" I didn't flinch. "No, Richard, I think it's fair." He stood there for a long moment, his breathing heavy, his pride collapsing like wet paper. Finally, he turned and walked out without another word. The door closed behind him, and for a while I just stood there, listening to the sound of my heartbeat. It wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't even victory. It was release. That night, I went home and sat by my window again, the same spot where years ago I had dreamed of escaping. The city lights glittered like promises kept. I thought about Richard, where he might go, what he might learn. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt peace, because revenge, real revenge, isn't about destroying someone. It's about showing them you never needed their approval to build your kingdom. A month later, I received a letter. No return address, just my name written in that same old handwriting. I opened it. "Catherine, you were right. I didn't respect you, and I paid the price. I lost everything. I'm starting over doing small design work for clients. I used to think power came from control, but now I see it comes from grace. I'm sorry, truly, Richard." I sat there for a long while, reading that letter over and over. Then I smiled, folded it neatly, and placed it in a box filled with all the things that once hurt me, now powerless against the woman I became. When people ask me about revenge, I tell them this: it's not about what you do to them. It's about what you build after they try to break you. So yes, I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I finally did. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. If you've ever rebuilt yourself after being underestimated, subscribe. Because your story, like mine, is only just beginning. It's been almost 3 years since the day Richard walked out of my office. Sometimes I wonder if that moment changed him or if it changed me more. Chicago winters have a strange way of reminding you what you've survived. The cold doesn't scare me anymore. I walk through it head high, wrapped in a soft wool coat and a kind of quiet that no longer feels like loneliness but peace. Monroe Interiors has become a name people recognize now. There are 40 employees across 3 states. My designs feature in magazines, and yet I still make my morning coffee myself. I still pause by the window, watching the snow fall over the city, and whisper to myself, "You made it." It's a small ritual, one that grounds me in everything I've built. That morning, as I sipped my coffee, Maria, my assistant, entered with that same cautious expression she always wore when she had to deliver unexpected news. "Catherine," she said gently, "someone's here to see you. He says it's personal." I didn't need her to say the name. I knew when I looked up. There he was, Richard. He wasn't the man I remembered. The sharp arrogance in his shoulders was gone. His suit didn't fit right, not out of wealth, but where his eyes had changed too. They weren't cruel anymore. They were tired and human. "Catherine," he said, voice trembling slightly, "you look incredible. Thank you." I replied, my tone even, "It's been a while." He nodded, glancing around my office. The walls were adorned with art, design sketches, photos from award ceremonies, the life I had created after him. "I came to see you because there's something I need to say," he continued. "I owe you an apology, a real one." I folded my arms, studying him. "Go on." He took a shaky breath. "When we divorced, I told myself you'd fail without me. I told everyone that, but I watched you rise and I hated you for it. Not because you beat me, but because I realized how small I made you feel, and how much bigger you truly were." His words hung heavy in the air. For a long time I didn't speak. Finally I said, "You could have come to that conclusion years ago, Richard." "I wasn't ready to face myself," he admitted quietly. "But I am now. I lost everything after you left, the business, the house. Everything. I started doing small renovation jobs, odd work just to keep afloat. One day, I met a single mother who couldn't afford a remodel. She told me she just wanted her daughter to feel proud of their home again. And when I finished the job, when I saw their smiles, I realized what you meant by building something that matters. He took a slow step closer. You changed my life, Catherine, and I wanted to thank you for teaching me how to be human again. There was no anger left in me, only a deep, bittersweet calm. I walked to the window, gazing at the city I once feared I'd never belong to. You know, I said softly, the day you told me I couldn't build anything without you, I almost believed it. For months I hated you. I wanted to destroy you, but every brick of this empire was built on what I learned from that pain. You didn't break me, Richard. You just revealed the woman I was always meant to be. He nodded slowly, emotion clouding his eyes. I'm proud of you. He whispered, thank you. I said simply, so, why are you really here? He hesitated. I started a nonprofit home renovations for people rebuilding their lives after divorce. I want to partner with you. Design, funding, maybe mentorship for women who are starting over. I can't do it alone. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who once laughed at my ambition was now asking for my partnership, not out of greed, but humility. I took a deep breath. You know, Richard, I said, turning to face him for the first time. That doesn't sound like business. That sounds like redemption. He smiled faintly. Maybe it's both. We stood there, two people who had destroyed and rebuilt each other in different ways. I saw the truth in his eyes, not the man I once loved, nor the one I once hated, but someone trying to start again. All right, I said finally, extending my hand. Let's build something real this time. His hand trembled slightly as he shook mine. Thank you, Catherine. That night, as I left the office, snow fell heavier. I walked slowly, feeling the chill sting my face, a reminder of how alive I was. A month later, our project launched, the Rebuild Foundation. We designed affordable homes for women recovering from broken marriages, giving them not just walls and roofs, but dignity. The press called it a partnership forged from pain. But for me, it wasn't about press or pride. It was about closing a circle. Years ago, my husband had laughed at me for dreaming too big. Now he worked beside me, quietly laying the groundwork for others to dream. One evening after the ribbon cutting of our first completed home, Richard approached me holding a small brass plaque. This belongs here, he said. It read, built by hands that once broke, for hearts that still believe. I smiled, touched it gently, and said, that's perfect. He smiled back. You were always the builder, Catherine. I just never saw it. When I got home that night, I stood by my window again, the city glowing beneath me like a promise fulfilled. I realized revenge had brought me power, but forgiveness had brought me peace. And peace, that's the real empire. If you've ever turned heartbreak into your foundation, subscribe, because strength doesn't scream, it creates.